So, as we wrap up here, I just really appreciate everything that you've had to say. But I thought that our audience might want to know a little more about your background. So, how did you get into BDSM? I mean, you don't have to give us your sexual history or whatever, but I guess my question more is, how did you get into the BDSM community, and how did this go from being, just a kink or a fetish or whatever you want to call it, into something that seems like it's much more of a kind of a community for you?
Yeah, so I consider BDSM and kink to be a very intrinsic part of my sexuality. It's not just a hobby for me. It's definitely something that I engage in on a regular basis with my partners. And it's a huge part of my life and a huge part of who I am as a person. And I can't imagine really not having it in my life. I think, and a lot of kinksters will say this, that they feel like they were born kinky, that it's just kind of something that is very innate in their personality and their sexuality. And, but for a long time, I didn't really realize it was a thing, that I could join this community, that I could engage in this. And I started kind of dabbling into it and sticking my foot in the door and learning more about it, but I hadn't really jumped fully in. And I had a really bad car accident where I had it was like a 4-car pile up on the freeway, and I was that car smushed in the middle. Thankfully, we all physically were okay, but mentally, I was like, it could have been a lot worse. Like, I could have really been injured. My wrist was a bit sore and my lower back was sore, but other than that, physically, I was okay. And I remember being picked up from the scene of the accident and being driven home. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I could have died right now, and I've never been spanked. Like, where are my priorities in life? Like, they're clearly not where they need to be right now. Like,
that was your thought?
Yes, that literally kept going through my brain. I was like, I've never been spanked. I've never explored this part of my sexuality that is really important to me. I was like, fuck it, like, I need to go do this. And so the next month, I kind of took the plunge and started really getting to know people and getting in the community. And the community as a whole, in general, it's a really wide range of different types of people coming in for different types of reasons. Like, BDSM is such an umbrella term. There's all different types of kinks that people engage in. But generally, the community as a whole is really nice. They're all about consent and trying to just enjoy who they are as a person in a way that's not judgmental.
Right.
And so that was another reason why I felt so at home there. I knew people weren't going to judge me for wanting to explore these different aspects of my sexuality.
And as you've said, because as you've said, our sexuality, the things that we enjoy, whether it's kinky or it's mainstream vanilla or whatever, but our sexuality is so much more than just the biological act, or it's more than sexuality. It really connects to all of these different aspects of our personality that maybe we're not allowed to explore in our normal everyday civilized lives, because sex is actually one of the few acceptable outlets for animalism, right? I mean, you can't, if you have like aggressive impulses, you can't just go and beat the shit out of someone, right? But you can be in the bedroom with consenting partner. You can do things that are edgy or that are even rough, right? Or if you're into something else, you can do other things, right? There was a famous porn director. He was directing stuff in the golden age of porn, like the late 70s and the early 80s, when people were actually, before VHS hit, when people were actually trying to do like arty stuff, kind of, right, with pornography. And he was a gay pornographer, but he famously said, I don't give a shit about coming. I don't care about coming. Coming is not what it's about. Okay. I care about everything else but the coming. And it's not to say like he didn't like to get off, or people didn't get off in his film, but like it was about exploring all of the other stuff around the actual act of sex. And so I think for people who, even though I don't have I don't have really experience in BDSM or a lot of insight, but I've read a little here and there, right? And talked to people like you. I think that people who don't understand it, they should understand it as much more than sexuality, but as a way for people to play roles or to experience parts of themselves, especially more id-like parts of themselves, maybe where it's aggression or being subject to someone else's aggression or domination and power relations and stuff that we just don't get to do in normal life, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all about consensually exploring fantasies and different things that you've always wanted to explore, but maybe you grew up feeling ashamed about. And then the trust, like there's a huge amount of trust.
Good
If
point.
someone is bound you and is hitting you, and they might not even be having sex, actual physical sex. 9 times out of 10, if people are just doing a scene, particularly if it's in a more public setting, like a BDSM party or a BDSM dungeon, a lot of times they're not even engaging in actual sex, but the act itself has a lot of sexual energy, and
Right.
it has that kind of feeling.
Like going to a strip club. Like,
Yeah.
when people go to strip clubs, most of the time there isn't sex at the end of that, right? For most
Right.
people, right? And yet there is something still obviously enjoyable in the experience. I don't actually personally get it. I'm like, why are you just going to sit around and be aroused and for hours in front of your friends? But whatever, whatever you want to do. But it sounds like that's what you're saying here, basically. In BDSM, there's these scenes, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's similar. A lot of people will watch scenes, and it's not a big deal. And yeah, like I said, it has a lot of trust, in a way that I think regular sex, more so than in regular sex. And I've had scenes with partners where I wasn't engaging in sex with them, but I had a very intense scene that lasted for hours, and we were doing
Wow.
bondage and a lot of masochistic play. And honestly, I felt like I had slept with that person because it was so intimate, but I never slept with them. So it's an extremely intimate thing, and there's so much trust that goes into it that I think a regular person that has no idea about BDSM, is not going to understand until they learn more about it. And it's not this scary thing that only scary, broken people engage in. There's doctors, lawyers, teachers, all different types of people on the spectrum, when it comes to their jobs and political affiliations, like that engage in BDSM and enjoy it. And yeah, it's something that I really enjoy, and a place that I kind of call home. And I think also with the Esme Bianco photograph, I think the reason why so many people just jumped the gun and was like, oh yes, we believe her, is because they're not educated and they're afraid of it. So it's
BDSM.
the BDSM and also Manson, right? So they look at that and they're just like, even though in their brain they're probably thinking those kind of look like rope marks, they're probably thinking, oh no, like they gotta be whip marks, because they're afraid of it. They don't want to actually think through, because there's a block in their brain. And then add on top of that Marilyn Manson, which they might have some, underlying fear of him and just total misunderstanding of who he is as an artist. Then they put that in there and they're like, oh, it must be whip marks, even though it's clearly not. So that's kind of my hypothesis of why so many people have just taken these women's words verbatim and not done any kind of research. And also, well, a lot of people in the BDSM community, honestly, I thought there might be more people that would come out and say something by this time, talk about nerve damage, talk about something else in a more public way, but I haven't really heard it. And I think a part of it is probably they are afraid of being labeled as like a rape apologist or something, because we take consent really seriously in the community. If somebody has even been, has a rumor that they might not be safe, generally they're not allowed to play in a certain space. And so I think that's another reason why maybe not as many people have spoken up.
Well, it's understandable. And again, I've had people behind the scenes, people who even know some of the main players involved and know that Manson didn't do this stuff, who've said, I'd like to say something, but I'm afraid my career will be ruined or whatever. And, so I do appreciate, I have to say that fear or that silence that apathy, whatever you want to call it, that does make me more appreciative of people like you. And so I do appreciate, and on behalf of my audience, I appreciate you taking the time to educate us about this stuff, and also to speak on behalf of Manson and the truth. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And everybody, as always, if you got something out of this video, like, subscribe. All of my links, tips, donations, whatever are below. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye, everybody. I'll see you next time.